Sharif Hussein ibn Ali was the head of the Hashimite family, an ancient Arab tribe that claimed to be descended from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Hashimites had ruled Mecca for centuries, even before the Ottoman Empire existed. Their line began when the Fatimid general Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Hassani conquered Mecca in 968 CE. Since then, 4 different Hashemite clans have ruled Mecca: Musawid, the Sulaymanid, the Hawashim, and finally, Banu Qatada. Banu Qatada came into power in 1205 when they were recognized as rulers of Mecca by Salahuddin's brother, Turtukin ibn Ayyub, ruler of the Ayyubid Empire. As the centuries passed, the Ayyubids were replaced by the Mamluks, who were then replaced by the Ottomans. When the Ottomans came into power in 1517, the ruler of Mecca was Sharif Barakat of the Banu Qatada clan. Sharif Barakat sent his son to the Ottoman Sultan in Cairo with gifts and the keys to the city, a dignified and subtle act of submission. The Sultan accepted the gifts and confirmed Sharif Barakat and his sons as rulers of Mecca. The British began getting involved in the affairs of the Hijaz in the late 18th century. As usual, they exploited divisions within the Muslim community. By this time, the Banu Qatada clan that ruled Mecca had split into 2 rival sub-clans, the Aun and the Zayd. In 1880, the governor of the Hijaz, a member of the Aun sub-clan, was assassinated. The Ottoman Sultan Abdul Hamid II suspected the dead governor had been working with the British and refused to appoint his brother al-Rafiq as the next governor of Mecca. Instead, hoping to limit British interference and strengthen Ottoman authority in the Hijaz, the Sultan appointed Abdul Muttalib ibn Ghalib from the rival Zayd clan. Not surprisingly, the British tried to block the Sultan's pick. For some reason, they thought their opinion mattered. The British consul in Jeddah wrote the Sultan to inform him it was in Britain's interest for al-Rafiq to govern the Hijaz. They praised him as an enlightened man while denouncing the Sultan's pick as a Wahhabi and a fanatic that hated Christians and foreigners. The British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire also tried to sway the Sultan's decision. He insisted Sultan Abdul Hamid II pick someone else besides Ibn Ghalib. Sultan Abdul Hamid II refused to change his mind, stating that the decision had already been made. However, when Ibn Ghalib died in 1886, the Sultan decided to appoint al-Rafiq as governor of the Hijaz in order to appease the British. Al-Rafiq died in 1905, and his nephew, Ali ibn Abdullah, replaced him. And things might have stayed this way if not for the Young Turks. Not long after Sultan Abdul Hamid II took the throne in 1876, the Ottoman Empire went to war against the Russian Empire. By the time the war was over, the Ottomans had lost most of their territory in the Balkans, the island of Cyprus, and Algeria in North Africa. In the aftermath of this defeat, Sultan Abdul Hamid II suspended the Ottoman Constitution and dissolved parliament. He considered them tools of Western influence and wanted to emphasize the empire's Islamic identity. Sultan Abdul Hamid II would go on to rule the Ottoman Empire as an autocrat for the next 30 years. During this period, the Sultan kept the empire out of major wars and slowly began to improve its infrastructure and overall economy. Despite being an autocrat, most Ottoman citizens were satisfied with the Sultan's rule. However, the Ottoman intellectual elite were not happy. They believed the empire's future depended on copying the West. In 1889, several Istanbul University students were implicated in a plot against the Sultan. Abdul Hamid II unleashed his secret police on his opponents, forcing them to go underground or flee to Paris. Over the next 30 years, the various opposition groups, particularly one called the Young Ottomans, quietly extended their network throughout the empire, but they were most successful and infiltrating the military. Much of this intrigue took place in the empire's Third Army, which was based in Salonika, now part of modern-day Greece. At the very edge of the Ottoman Empire's domain, Salonika was the perfect breeding ground for the many secret organizations that wanted to overthrow the Sultan. Salonika was also rife with anarchist and rebellious energy. Also, the Kingdom of Greece, which was right next door to the Ottoman Empire, wanted Salonika for itself and was constantly meddling in its affairs. And Salonika had at least two very active Freemasonic lodges. This was the city that would become the flashpoint for the Sultan's downfall. Salonika's postmaster was a government bureaucrat and Freemason named Mehmed Tolat. Mehmed Tolat was the founder of a secret organization which merged with other like-minded organizations to form the Committee for Union and Progress, or CUP for short. Mehmed Tolat, or Tolat Pasha as he'd later be known, convinced Jamal Pasha to join this new organization. Jamal Pasha was one of the commanders of the Third Army based in Salonika. Jamal Pasha convinced other soldiers in the Third Army to join the Committee for Union and Progress, including a young officer named Ismail Enver, later known as Enver Pasha. Tolat Pasha, Jamal Pasha, and Enver Pasha would later become known as the Three Pashas, the men who controlled the Ottoman Empire during World War I. In the summer of 1908, Sultan Abdul Hamid's secret police discovered CUP's activities in the Third Army and moved in to arrest the culprits. But someone tipped them off, and the members of CUP, many of whom were soldiers, fled to the hills of Salonika. Amongst them was Enver Pasha. Eventually, the members of CUP decided to stop hiding in the hills, march to Istanbul, and demand the Sultan restore the constitution. As the members of CUP traveled through the Balkans towards the capital, their numbers continued to grow. They overran the Sultan's troops and closed in on Istanbul. As word spread through the streets of Istanbul, the Sultan's cabinet panicked. Sultan Abdul Hamid II, now 65 years old, was faced with a choice: submit to CUP's demands or risk a civil war. On July 24, 1908, he agreed to reinstate the constitution and reconvene parliament. This turned the Sultan into a constitutional monarch, making him little more than a figurehead. The Sultan's defeat shocked the world. Western newspapers praised these Young Turks, their name for the Committee of Union and Progress, for bringing reform to the empire. When the Young Turks took over the Ottoman government in Istanbul, they introduced sweeping changes to the empire. Government officials who were known to be loyal to the Sultan were soon out of a job. One of these unlucky officials was Ali ibn Abdullah, the Hashimite ruler of Mecca. The Young Turks deposed him and sent him into exile. The Young Turks allowed the Sultan to appoint a new ruler for Mecca. Sultan Abdul Hamid II chose Hussein ibn Ali, the scholarly, middle-aged cousin of Ali ibn Abdullah. The Young Turks were mostly soldiers and not career politicians. They appointed representatives in Istanbul as an oversight committee to ensure the Sultan did not try to regain power. Then they returned to Salonika. Over the next several weeks, the new Young Turk-controlled parliament passed laws that concentrated power in Istanbul and further secularized the empire. The Ottoman Empire's foreign enemies took advantage of its weakness during this transition. A few months after the Young Turk Revolution, Bulgaria, which was already an autonomous province, declared complete independence from the Ottoman Empire. The very next day, Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina, and soon after that, Crete seceded from the empire and merged with Greece. These sudden territorial losses turned the Ottoman people against the Young Turks and its new government. In particular, soldiers from the Ottoman Empire's First Army were furious the new leadership did nothing to prevent these losses. Unlike the Third Army, the First Army was loyal to the Sultan. In April 1909, several First Army soldiers mutinied against their officers and marched on Istanbul, demanding the restoration of the Sultan. Sultan Abdul Hamid II enjoyed a brief return to full authority, but 2 weeks after the mutiny, the Third Army arrived from Salonika, occupied the city, and regained control. 3 days later, Parliament voted to depose Sultan Abdul Hamid II in favor of his younger brother, Mehmed V. Throughout all this turmoil, Sharif Hussein ibn Ali, the governor of Mecca, managed to hold on to his position. Even though he had been appointed by the deposed Sultan, the Young Turks were reluctant to get rid of him. They thought of him as a compromise candidate that might help heal the rift between the two opposing sides. However, Sharif Hussein's loyalty was with the Ottoman Sultan. He did not trust the Young Turks. In his mind, the Young Turks were secular Freemasons hell-bent on copying the West. Over the next several years, he opposed many of Istanbul's attempts to modernize the empire, creating friction between himself and the Young Turks. This friction was made worse by the rising wave of nationalism in the Ottoman Empire. Nationalism was the primary force that led to the tragedy known as World War I. There are many definitions for nationalism, but the one I believe best fits our story is an exaggerated, passionate, or fanatical devotion to a national community. Now let's be clear, there is nothing wrong with love for one's nation, country, culture, or ethnic heritage. But there is a problem when that love leads to feelings of superiority or demonizing members of other groups. Before nationalism took hold in the Ottoman Empire, there was very little conflict between Arabs and Turks. These two groups had lived together, intermarried, and fought both alongside and against each other for centuries. Unlike most modern nations, including the United States, the Ottoman Empire did not maintain records of ethnicity or race. When an Ottoman citizen had to fill out government paperwork, she did not have to tick a box stating whether she was white or black or Arab or Turk. The only demographic that mattered was her religion. Throughout much of Syria and Turkey and Mesopotamia, there was no such thing as a pure Arab or a pure Turk. The various ethnic groups of the Ottoman Empire had intermingled and mixed so much, the only thing separating one group from another was their language and religion. Turkish nationalism and Arab nationalism both existed long before World War I, but the Ottoman Sultan, who was also the Caliph, kept these sentiments at bay. It was mostly the intellectual elites, many of whom had studied in Europe, who promoted nationalism. And when the Young Turks took over the government, they brought these nationalist ideas along with them. Turkish nationalism alienated the Arab elites and fueled the growing resentment of the Ottoman Empire. As Arab nationalism and Turkish nationalism divided the empire, the relationship between Sharif Hussein ibn Ali and the Young Turks deteriorated. The breakdown of this relationship is what ultimately led Sharif Hussein ibn Ali to side with the British during World War I. In the next episode, inshallah, we will discuss the rise of Arab nationalism in the Ottoman Empire.